So let me start off with a bit of the damage control, if you will. I like this game a lot. It's very fun. It's very, very fun. But that's primarily just because it's Breath of the Wild. And I I felt this way kind of the entire time I've been playing this game. I've already completed the game, and I feel confident in my ability to talk about it now that I've played about 80 some hours in it. But I felt this way kind of the entire time I played the game. I've always had these issues back to back to back to back, and the only reason I'm mentioning it so late into the game is because we've kind of entered a phase where it's now socially accepted to discuss this game more critically. Before, you would get castrated if you even thought about it, and I will talk about that kind of at the end of the video when I go over the general consensus at the end. But I need to get this off my chest. Also, I'm actively playing this while I'm recording this, because I'm too lazy to do post-recording and all that. And I'm on a time crunch. So, let's just talk about it while I go check out all my light routes and get my depths map a little more filled out. So, I do like this game a lot, and I want to talk about the things that I like about it before I start going into the swath of things that I dislike about it. So, one, I think the new systems are really cool. Ignore the fact that I don't have the last thing. I just didn't care about auto build. So, Ultra Hand is insanely fun and insanely cool. I think that realistically, this is where the dev time really shows, because it is one of the most well thought out and intricate systems in the game, and everything in this game kind of revolves around that working well, and that being conceptually really interesting, and I think it's really cool that they pulled it off. I also like Ascend. I like, realistically, I can't go back to the abilities from Breath of the Wild. It's just, these are so useful. Ascend, as you can tell, is just like de facto such a good way to get around the world and to experience things. It limits the amount of time you're climbing. It's just, it's perfect. It's amazing. If you know when to use it, you know, you can get a lot of mileage out of it. That's awesome. The dungeons, also fantastic. I haven't seen an open world game really capture the same level of wonder that I had when experiencing these dungeons for the first time. The way that they're interspersed in the world is generally very cool. I think the one that stands out to me the most is the Fire Temple, and it's just something about it is so nice. I love it to death. Outside of that, the cave systems in Hyrule are pretty awesome. I like those a lot. I think they add a level of depth to exploring the world that you didn't really get in Breath of the Wild. There was value in going to some kind of like back corner areas that in Breath of the Wild clearly didn't have a shrine in them. So it was like, well, why am I gonna go check it out? It doesn't matter. But cave systems, the addition of new collectibles, that generally built more value in exploring the world more deeply and seeing areas that you wouldn't necessarily see in Breath of the Wild. So I think those are really cool, and the verticality they add is just really awesome. Otherwise, I think like the opening to the Sky Island is really awesome. The Great Sky Island is probably, I don't know, it's hard to compare it to the Great Plateau because they're trying to go for two completely different things. The Great Plateau is more of an emphasis on what Breath of the Wild is and what it's going for as a game, whereas the Great Sky Islands are a little bit more linear, which is also kind of indicative of what this game wants to be, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But you know, that's part of the experience. The linearness, and I don't know, it goes for that. It does it really well. I think that's a really awesome area, and it really sets up the sky to be this really awesome, really cool thing. And I don't know, that's kind of like the big list of stuff. It feels like the entire identity of this game is kind of based on Ultra Hand, and on the dungeons, right? Like the dungeons were a massive part of this game for me. It was a massive part of why I was excited, why I pushed through it as fast as I did, why I enjoyed it as much as much as I did. And if you interacted with social media at all, you saw Ultra Hand. You saw what Ultra Hand could do, and you saw the identity it created for this game. Now, that's awesome and all, and I generally I very much enjoy what this game has to offer on those fronts. But beyond that, I do have a bit of an issue with a lot of everything else. So I kind of want to. I'll start off with what I'm in right now, the depths. I think by far this is the weakest part of the game in every capacity. It is not fun. It is. I don't want to say poorly designed. That's such an easy get out of jail free card, where you can just say that and then not explain, and people will be like, "He's got to know something." So poorly designed isn't what I'm trying to say. It doesn't feel like there was any degree of care put into them, because there's nothing to do in the depths. You can already see, if you look around, there's almost nothing. There's that building station, which is copy and pasted everywhere in the depths. There are the same enemy camps thrown about, copy and pasted everywhere. There's boss fights pasted everywhere. Caldera was so cool. Caldera was so cool. And then I fought him once in the depths, and I was like, oh, well, that's cute. There's a nice little way you can refight the bosses. I'm sure there's gonna be a boss rematch for every boss in the depths, and then like 5 paces to in a different direction, and I fought him again. And there's rematches for every single boss in the depths, and it's so poorly put together, and it seems like, you have this whole map that matches the size of Hyrule, but it only matches the size of Hyrule without any of the content. Like, it was such a missed opportunity to provide some form of value to this experience, because there's nothing here. And I've talked to some other people about this, and they're like, well, I like mining for Zonite. I think Zonite's fun. And sure, there's reason to come to the depths. There is reason. So you can get bomb flowers, certain materials are found here, like Zonite, but that's it. That's it. Those are the only unique things that are here. And if the only unique things you can find in the depths are rocks you can break so that you can upgrade your battery, it's fucking pointless. It's pointless. There's so little here. Off the top of my head, I can name, so there's like the little ghost Poe guys you can find, and you can get stuff that way. There's the, not Sheikah, the, whatever they're called, the fucking red dude, Yiga clan, hideouts. Those are copy and pasted. I think I've seen like maybe two or three variants of them after exploring the depths for God knows how many hours. And then they have, unblighted weapons, if you want to call it that. You have weapons that don't have blight on them. Is there a thing here? Let's talk about this. Oh my God, there is. I can just go around. The way that they designed the depths, and this actually made me honestly like the depths less. It was cute for like a second, and then I was like, oh, that. I don't know. It doesn't feel that special anymore. If you look, anywhere that there's water, there will be an immovable, impassable area. There will be a wall. So if you go up to like a river, there's going to be a wall here. And all of the light routes, they're connected to shrines. So in a way, you can go to light routes and you'll find a way to go to shrines, and that's kind of fun. But it loses all luster when you realize that it not only do the depths mimic the overworld so closely, they also have no interesting visual design outside. This is what you're going to be looking at the entire time you explore this vast world, by the way. So cool, so fun. And there's like a lava area. That's the only terrain change. I know someone's going to bring that out. I know about that one. And there's the water, which doesn't change anything visually, so if you were gonna bring those two up, that's kind of all you got. That's kind of the only things the depths has visually. And then you have, you know, the most obvious reuses of content. There's just nothing here. There's nothing here, and I think this is the most egregious reuse of content, the most egregiously bad area in the game. And it was so surprising to me people were using it as a strength for this game, when the only really interesting parts about it come maybe 2 hours into exploring it, and then you're just done. Like, that's it. But enough harping on the depths. We also have the sky, which is an entirely, quote-unquote, second map, quote-unquote, because there's kind of nothing here. The reason they removed a lot of this content, because they were going to put more in the sky, is because it was visually, there was just too much. There was too much stuff there. And not a fan of that, because there's so little in the sky. It was such a big part of the marketing, because it's the most visually interesting area in the game. But there's just nothing there. There's absolutely no... There's nothing there but a few shrines. There's, like, maybe 20-ish sky islands. You know, correct me if I'm wrong on that number, but there's very little. There's very little to experience in the sky, and I generally saw a lot of reused content in the sky as well. So like you would always see when you were interacting with the sky island or a set of sky islands, you would always see this one sky island where it would be like the turntable, and you'd spin it, and then you could shoot out into a different direction, and that was it. And there's no super interesting way to get from sky island to sky island outside of just building stuff generally, and using your like little reverse time tool, which is pretty cool. But that's kind of it. That's kind of it for that. And it's, I don't know, just something about it feels so lacking, because you kind of go up there and explore for an hour or two as well, and you feel like you've seen everything that you need to see. And it's really unfortunate. It's very unfortunate, because the Great Sky Island opens to such a strong start. It's such a strong start, and then every Sky Island pales in comparison when moving forward, and I wish it wasn't that way, because there's so much value to be found in the sky, in the Great Sky Island, and then you just lose all of that, and it sucks. But that can barely be called a new map, so we're kind of down to like an empty additional map to Hyrule, which is the depths, and then you have a similarly empty additional quote-unquote map called the Sky Islands, because there's practically nothing up there. And then you get to Hyrule, which is unfortunately one of the best parts of the game. And you shouldn't be saying that for, you know, content that has been effectively ripped and highly edited, right? Like, the best new content for this game, or the best content for this game, rather, shouldn't be content that's not entirely new. So I think, you know, Hyrule has the most interesting navigation with it, because you have, you know, the caves and everything, and you have slightly changed villages and everything. But when you really get down to it, I think it's just kind of a worse experience than Breath of the Wild's version of Hyrule, even with all that extra content to explore, because there's something that has to do with exploration that I'll get into in a little bit, and it has to do with the structure of the game and the way that the game is presented, and like that, we'll get into that. Structure is a very big point for this game that I'm docking points for. But beyond that, it still feels like you're exploring the exact same world, just highly edited, you know, so like it feels like a very solid Breath of the Wild mod, more so than it does an entirely new experience. And that's the big takeaway for this game for me. It's so good and feels so fun to play because it's Breath of the Wild. That's why it's a fun experience. It's because it takes from a game that, you know, had this really fun system, and it takes all those fun systems and just kind of, you know, does it again. So it's still fun, but a lot of the most fun aspects of this game are just things that you could find in Breath of the Wild, specifically with world exploration. But Hyrule, coolest part of the game, which isn't a very good sign, but it, you know, still feels like exploring the same world with heavy edits. So it just falls insanely flat in that way. And then progression. Like, this is the last big thing I'll harp on. There's a few things here and there. Like, I don't like how they didn't add pretty much anything unique to, like, any of the villages, really. Like, the villages are a massive letdown. They're not that fun. They're not that cool. Not a big fan of those. But beyond that, right, progression feels so bad. It feels so bad. Now, progression's a very broad and kind of nebulous term, so I do want to define it while I'm here. By progression, I mean narrative progression. And to a lesser extent, world progression. The way that you experience the world, right? So, starting off with narrative progression, this is something that you will notice very quickly. If you decide to go for, like, the water temple first, right? The way that you interact with the beginning of temples and the way that you interact with story progression is far more linear than it ever was in Breath of the Wild. It feels like it's trying to harken back to, you know, a bygone era of Zelda that everybody loves, where it's, you know, the general 3D games that had the same structure, the more linear experiences, and I'm fine with them trying to go in that direction. But they also very much wanted this game to still be the structure of Breath of the Wild in terms of openness, you know, experience the open world, have a great time running around and looking at everything and experiencing new areas, yada 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 yada. That's awesome. But they don't mix. They don't mix at all. And I'm sure there's a way that you could get it to mix, but this game did not find that at all. Especially with interacting with any of the narrative elements that you're gonna be having in this game. Like, it's just, it feels bad. It feels wrong. I think the best example I have is the lead up to the water temple, because it is probably the most worthlessly convoluted experience I've ever had, because I'm just running around Zora's Domain, I'm grabbing thing after thing after thing, and for why? For, like, what's the purpose? None of it has a logical progression. It's just something that exists to add some form of linearity to the experience, to make it feel like you're doing more while still getting the open world experience, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't work well whatsoever. It's two very conflicting mentalities kind of at war with each other, and this is... The water temple's the worst example of it, for sure. Like, a good example from that is when I was towards the end of it, and I was like, okay, awesome, let's get into the temple. I've done all this random bullshit for everybody. Let me just get in and go and experience the temple. And then I did, like, the mini dungeon leading up to it, and then the waterfall appeared, and it was like, wait, but can you go find this fish? Can you go find this random fucking fish? So that you can get the armor that you need to swim up the waterfall. Can you go get that? Like, okay. No. That's so dumb. If I need that to experience the temple, it would realistically make more sense for them to give it to me. Structurally, that would make more sense at the end of the day. And beyond that, why do I have to find a random fish? Yes, I know the fish is right there. Like, it's very easy to find. It's right in Zora's Domain. It's like 2 steps away. But why? Genuinely, why? Why is this, like, why is that your way of nailing down progression? You're like, yeah, let's make them go find a fish. It doesn't work. It doesn't feel natural. It doesn't feel right. It fails to really capture the wonder that a linear 3D Zelda game has. It's not a good experience, and I think it's something that kind of permeates every aspect of the way this game handles story. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of the way that's structured. Thanks, man. That was really cool of you. I'm surprised I didn't get interrupted like that earlier. We're just gonna go down here like this. But it's frustrating. It's frustrating, and I don't like dealing with those situations. I genuinely wanted to get the narrative over with so I could just experience the game however I wanted to experience the game, you know, because it didn't feel effective. It didn't feel effective at all. And the way that kind of creeps its way into actual overworld progression is kind of interesting. When you get thrown immediately off the Great Sky Island, this is the best example of it I have. When you get thrown immediately off the Great Sky Island, and then you're like, all right, time to go explore the world. The game very much forces you in the direction of Lookout Landing. Because you want the paraglider, you need the paraglider. Where's that? Lookout Landing. Okay, awesome, cool. Here's the thing, though. The way that Breath of the Wild was designed was to be this really well thought out world that had like monuments and landmarks that would make you go, oh boy, I want to go in that direction. And through that, the game would slowly push you in the direction of places that you needed to go. Right? It didn't just give you an area on the map and was like, go for it. That's what made it so special. That's what made it so different and valuable compared to other open world experiences. You would get the gratification of continuing story progress while also exploring the things you wanted to explore because you saw them in the distance. You didn't just see a mark on a map and go to it. That's it. That's the big thing, right? Because this game reuses the overworld of Hyrule, you get this experience where you are interacting with a world that is pushing you in directions that the story doesn't want you to go, because the story is different. The story wants you to go here or there or all around the square, but the actual overworld is still working on those Breath of the Wild principles, where it'll be like, hey, you should definitely totally go over in this direction because there's something really big and cool over there. The game really doesn't add anything super unique to Tears of the Kingdom that could realistically push you in the directions that it wants to go in. I went off in a completely different direction that wasn't Lookout Landing because I had my own plans. I had my own thoughts. I was like, oh, look at that big cool thing in the distance. Let's go there. You know, it feels like the world of Hyrule is actively working against what this game wants, and it creates a very poor progression in world exploration in comparison to what we got in Breath of the Wild. It doesn't feel satisfying in the same way, and I'm just not a fan. I'm not a fan. So that's kind of the big stuff, and I guess, you know, general consensus on this game overall is that I think the new content really hits maybe 2/4 of the time, maybe half of the time. Maybe even a third of the time. But, like, to be gracious, like a half of the time the new content hits, right? And you get to experience that really fun new Tears of the Kingdom content and what makes the game unique and what gives it identity. But then that other half of the time, you just experience an inferior Breath of the Wild. And a game that feels like it lacks identity and is only fun because of what its predecessor did for it. And it's such a weird, convoluted mix of things, right? So, I think the game really shines when it feels like it's closely mimicking Breath of the Wild, but still, like, adding new content. Does that make sense? Where it still has the same design philosophies and ideologies as Breath of the Wild, but it's new. Because as of now, the game doesn't feel that way. The game feels very much like it's trying to do something completely different, but it's still trying to be Breath of the Wild, and it's falling into a confused mess. Ultra Hand is gas. Ultra Hand is very good. It's probably the best part of the game and creates the most unique identity with it, identity for Tears of the Kingdom. But the Depths in the Skies, new content, they're hard to get into, and they realistically kind of suck. And I think Hyrule being the most fun part of the game should not be the case because it's reused content to a very high degree. And I just think it's telling that at this point in time, even very casual players of this game are coming up with a fair number of issues that this game has and vocalizing them at this time in the game's lifespan, because it took about maybe 2 to 3 years for that to really be the case for Breath of the Wild, yet you have this experience so quickly with Tears of the Kingdom. And I guess to kind of cap things off after that big consensus, right? By the way, this is the content I never did because I never really cared about it. It's you get auto build, but I didn't really ever use or feel like I needed auto build, so I didn't ever use it. But getting it now, yay! 80 some hours, 90-ish hours into the game. But yeah, seriously, I think that this game is really disappointing, even though it's such a fun game, such a fun experience. You know, for the amount of time that was spent on it, and for what we thought this game was going to be, I feel let down in a lot of ways, because it feels to not have the same care that most Zelda games do have, you know? This is probably one of my least favorite Zelda games, unfortunately. And beyond that, I think it's really unfortunate that I had to wait this long to talk about this, because I have had these thoughts for a very long time, and I felt this way for effectively, I don't know, since, like, the game came out, and I started experiencing it, and I was like, oh, that's weird, I'm not a fan of that, oh, that's weird, I don't really like that, and it was just a lot of compounding stuff, and I tried talking about it once when I started the game, and I was very overtly negative. And I did it in this YouTube video, and I got fucking lambasted until I sucked the game's dick at the very end of the video, and then people were like, okay, yeah, no, let him cook, he's coming around. When literally none of my opinions from that video changed, after getting 90-some hours into the experience. And the idea that I have to walk on fucking eggshells and tiptoe around what I feel about a game because the internet is so connected to this experience for seemingly no reason, it's a weird thing. It's a very, very weird feeling. And I think the fact that people have such deep recency bias and allow that to affect the way that they discuss games in a very severe, serious way, it's just unfortunate. It's unfortunate. And I'm not gonna sit here and be like, I'm holier than thou. I don't experience recency bias, right? Everyone does. Everyone has some aspect of recency bias in their veins. You know, not exactly that way, but you know what I'm saying, right? When people interact with something, they generally interact with it within the context of when they're experiencing it. And recency bias is a part of experiencing media, right? It's factually a part of it, and it's fine. But people degrading others and lambasting them for having a different opinion on a fucking video game experience that in the end there's a consensus coming around that, yeah, there's a lot of problems with it. Like, grow up. Grow and change as a person, because there's so much wrong with you forcing your own opinion onto other people because you have an emotional connection to an experience. I loved Breath of the Wild. I loved it to death. It is one of, if not my favorite Zelda game. Despite that, I could still look at this game with any form of critical eye. And for the people that enjoyed the experience, I didn't lambast them for enjoying the experience. Enjoying the experience is fine and normal. But the other way around, it was not okay for some reason to question this game in any capacity or to give it any form of shit. So there we go. That's kind of my big deal. It got very ranty at the end, but I think overall, Tears of the Kingdom is a fun game, and if you enjoy the experience, I'm not saying stop enjoying the experience. I'm just saying think about the experience, think about how you've enjoyed the experience, why you enjoyed the experience, and why you maybe don't enjoy it as much. That's completely fine, guys. It's completely fine to feel any which way about it. But that's why I think Tears of the Kingdom ain't all that.